Okay, why are we playing that moment from the University of California, perhaps their most amazing moment? It's a football moment. Our guest today is a baseball player, but Jon Zuber, I'm sure you can appreciate the sounds of the play and of Joe Starkey, the announcer for the Cal Bears. Um, I want to preface this to say that I'm very proud to have Jon Zuber on our show today. I was with Jon for a couple of years, 1991, 92, when I was the bullpen coach for the University of California. I should say that in that position, I was like the Kevin Pollak character in A Few Good Men. I had absolutely no responsibilities there whatsoever. I threw batting practice and I hit ground balls to infielders and I chewed tobacco on the bench and rooted for the team. But the man we're looking at here, Jon Zuber, he was the star first baseman and closer on those teams, which were really, really strong teams. The pitching staff was not all that great, but two of the most offensively strong teams that I've ever been associated with. And Jon was a hard-hitting, slick fielding first baseman. And simply, in all the years that I've ever been around sports, as an athlete, as a coach, as a writer, as a member of the media, as a fan, as intense an athlete as I've ever known. Off the field, a great guy, really fun guy to be around, got a smile on his face. He would joke, he would say all kinds, he'd joke around, and then the game would start, and oh my God, Jon Zuber. So we'll get into that. Mr. Zuber, I want to welcome you and thank you for being a member of Take 5 with Steven Travers.
I appreciate you having me.
All right. Well, Jon, why don't we just start from the beginning, because that's always the way to go. Let me ask you this. There was a coach at Pepperdine by the name of Zuber. Was he related to your family?
No, I have no relations there. I knew that. I think there was a couple other guys that played as well. I think there was a Bob Zuber, and just recently in the big leagues, there's another kid that got called up to pitch. His last name was Zuber. I have no relation to any of them.
Okay, I wasn't sure. One of my best friends, Brad Cole, in fact, a lot of my friends played for the 1979 Pepperdine Waves, and they had a coach named Zuber. Then he left, and they got a new coach in 79 and went to the College World Series. I never was able to put that together. Your dad's name was Ed, is that correct?
That is right, yeah.
And you used to refer to him as Big Ed. And was he from the Los Angeles area?
Yeah, both my parents, my mom and dad were from LA. They went to Dorsey High School and then on to USC. And I was actually born down there and grew up. Well, I didn't grow up there. We moved up to Northern California when I was 4, but we always went back down there because they were USC alums through and through, and would go see all the football games, and then when USC baseball would come up here and play Cal, we'd go and root for USC against Cal and go to team dinners and things like that for the Trojans.
Did your dad play baseball for Rod Data?
He did not. No, he played in high school, and that was as far as he went.
And during that time in which you lived in Los Angeles, what part of LA did you live in?
We were in Northridge.
Okay.
In the Valley.
And then now what was the reason that you moved to Northern California?
My dad got transferred up here. He worked his whole life after he graduated from USC. He worked his whole professional life for Liberty Mutual Insurance, and he was working down there, and I guess there was a job opportunity up in San Francisco, and he took it. When you're 4 years old, you
Sure.
All right, where you go where they go, right? So we moved up here and stayed up here the whole time.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have an older sister who went to USC actually,
Right.
and still a huge Trojan fan to this day.
Okay. Now, did you grow up in Orinda?
Grew up in Moraga, right next to Orinda.
Moraga. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. They're right next to each other. So that's a nice place to live. What was life like in Moraga?
Moraga was great. It was simple at that time. It's just, it was the old time. Just hey, when get on your bike, ride around town, ride around to see your friends, and ride home at night. And it was safe, and it was a great community to grow up in. And the high school that I went to, Camp Lindo, was I mean, everybody in the town loved that high school and followed it, and the sporting events were always well attended. But just a great place to grow up. Some people called it Boraga because it was boring, not a whole lot to do. But my friends and I found enough to do. We we like playing sports, so we're outside playing wiffle ball or basketball, or sneaking on some places that we probably weren't supposed to go fishing and things like that.
Right. Was baseball your number one sport from the beginning, or were there others? I know you were avid about basketball. Any other sports?
Yeah, I mean, I played pretty much whatever season was going on. I played it until I got to high school, and then I was always very small. So when I was a freshman in high school, I was 5'1", 96 pounds, and so my mom wouldn't let me play football. She wouldn't sign the permission slip to play football. So I played basketball and baseball, going all the way. And I always liked baseball. I really liked basketball, but it just turned out, I ended up getting a little bit better probably a lot better at baseball than I was at basketball, and so I enjoyed it. I had some great coaches and mentors. My dad coached me all the way up until I got to high school, and then when I got to high school, my high school coaches and my Legion coaches were huge mentors to me on how to play the game and go about it, and they helped me out in a ton of different ways.
You mentioned American Legion baseball, and that interests me. What was the name of your American Legion team that you played on during your high school years?
We were Lafayette American Legion, Post 517.
Okay. And was that team kind of an all-star team of local high schools, or was it centered on any one particular high school, like, Camp Lindo High?
Yeah, so it was mainly Camp Lindo, Alcalanes, Marimani High School, the three high schools in the Lafayette, Moraga, Orinda area. Every now and then we'd get a kid from Alhambra High School and Martinez, or De La Salle High School in Concord. But the vast majority of us were from those high schools. And I would say Camp Lindo probably being the main one, the main feeder.
Did you ever play against a team in American Legion ball called the Walnut Creek Aztecs?
No. So when I was coming through, I don't believe Walnut Creek had a team. They weren't in the league. We would play Antioch and Danville, Palo Alto. I think El Cerrito had a team, but I don't recall Walnut Creek having it. Clayton had a team, so
right. Well, I asked that because I played against the Walnut Creek Aztecs when I was a high school player in the summer leagues in Marin County. And Chad Kruder played for them, who later went on to a great career in the major leagues. Okay, now you mentioned that your dad coached you. Was he taking you out to the ballpark and working you out on like specific drills all the time as you were growing up? Were your workouts pretty regulated? How would you
No,
describe that?
not at all. He, we would go out to the field. He'd throw me batting practice and hit me ground balls and things like that. But nothing. We'd do the same thing. We'd go out and we would shoot baskets, or he'd throw me passes. Running pass routes or something like that. So it was more just, I think, getting out there as a dad and a son and having fun doing it. You usually tilted a little bit more towards the baseball side. I think, that's where his passion was. So while those other sports, football and basketball, we did usually during the basketball and football season, we would still do baseball in the fall and the winter and stuff like that. So I think it was a little more tilted towards that, but it's just, hey, I'll go throw you some batting practice and hit you some ground balls and, throw, whatever a 10, 11-year-old bullpen was, where, we'd count how many times I could throw strikes out of 25 pitches or something like that.
At about what point in high school, sophomore, maybe junior year, do you realize, hey, I've got something special? Let's say a scout or some scouts are coming to the ballpark and making their presence known that they're watching you. A college recruiter is letting you know, we're looking at you. The local newspapers are writing up, Jon Zuber did this or Jon Zuber did that. What was the point where that started to happen?
Yeah, you know what? Different than today's athlete. I didn't play on varsity until I was a junior in high school. I played JV my freshman and sophomore year, and I got called up for the playoffs when I was a sophomore.
Right.
The NCS playoffs, but it probably started between my sophomore and junior year in high school. I was on the American Legion team, and so I was playing for them and having a great time, and started getting a couple letters in the mail from different schools, and obviously surprised me. I had no idea at that point, if I was any good or not, or what. I just was having fun with my guys. And then I sort of made a decision that, hey, I wanted to play, somewhere in college, or I wanted to at least try to play somewhere in college. And I didn't quite know how to go about it. So one weekend I went down to the library because we didn't have internet back then, and went back down to the library, and they had a huge book of all the colleges and all their addresses and things like that. And I picked out a bunch of schools from all over the country at pretty much every level, and wrote a letter to all of them and asked them if I could get some information on their school and that I'd be interested, and gave them contact information of my coaches. And I guess that's sort of where it started.
Wow. Okay. So you're at Camp Alindo High School. You had, I'm pretty sure you had a teammate named Mike Harrison, correct?
I did. Yeah.
Mike Harrison he later played at Cal, so I knew him when he was with the Cal Bears. And he was as good a natural athlete as I've ever seen. I believe his mother had been an Olympics diver or a top-level diver, and his father had been maybe a football star or a baseball star or both. He just had incredible genetics. He looked like a Viking god. He was built like, just a stack of bricks. He had a gun for an arm. So you're talking about, I don't make the varsity till I'm a junior. I'm only 96 pounds as a freshman. I'm assuming that Mike Harrison was kind of this already formed athletic specimen in high school. Tell us about when you first met him. How did you become friends? How did this
So I knew Mike. Obviously, we were both from Moraga. and we went to different elementary schools, but we went to the same junior high school, and we're good friends. He's still one of my closest friends in the world to this day. But he was, yeah, he was like the all-American, great at everything, big, strong kid. I mean, somebody that I looked up to, and I still do today, as somebody who, I always knew if Harry was there. That's what I call him, Harry. Everybody calls him Harry. I always knew if Harry was there, things were going to be all right. He was like the protector, and the guy was just an absolute stud at everything. He got recruited to play Division I football, and then he ultimately chose baseball at Cal. But he was a third round draft pick out of high school by the Twins. Elected not to sign at that time, and came to Cal. And then after his sophomore year, he was Team USA's catcher. I think for a while he held the home run record at Cal, and he's in the Cal Hall of Fame, and he was just tremendous. I'm not sure on his mom's the sweetest lady in the world. His dad was an Olympic swimmer.
Oh, his dad was. Okay.
His dad won a gold medal in I believe it was the 1960 games in swimming, and he swam for Stanford. But Mike was just phenomenal. One of the best athletes I've ever seen in my life.
Were your families close, parents?
Yeah, they were. They would have dinner together and things like that, and they remained pretty close even after we stopped playing. But the dinners that we would have at Cal, and when we were playing at Cal, we would always, whether it was on the road or at home, we'd always have dinners, and our parents would be there, and other parents and things like that. But yeah, they were close. My dad and Mike's dad actually coached our team in Pony when we were 13 and 14.
Right.
They coached it.
That's a very special relationship and opportunity to grow up with someone, and we'll get to that, and we'll get to how far that developed. What position did Mike play in football in high school?
So Mike was a quarterback, and then they shifted him to tailback. So he started at quarterback, I think, 1 or 2 years, and then they shifted him to tailback. They had another really good quarterback, a guy named Steve Sullivan, and Sully came in, and he was like 6'3" or 6'4" or something like that, could sling it, and he was actually one of our pitchers on our high school team too, and ended up pitching for Cal State Northridge. And they shifted Mike back to tailback, and obviously Mike being Mike, just whatever, sweep left, sweep right, whatever the plays were called, he would turn the corner, and tell you what, there's no little cornerback that wanted to tackle him.
Right. Were you a pitcher in high school as well?
I was. I always pitch and hit growing up. And the funny thing is, most schools recruited me as a pitcher and not a hitter. And that was part of the reason I chose to go to Cal.
Were you a starter?
I was. Yeah, I was a starter. And I think the first start I made at Cal was the last game of the season against Stanford my junior year. I started that game, and I hadn't started a game before then. And then my senior year, I started and closed. So
right,
I did whatever they wanted on that side of things.
We'll get to that, because those were some thrilling moments. Before we finish high school, I remember, I remember reading the Cal Media Guide and reading about you and Mike Harrison. Oh, these two guys both came out of the same high schools, and you had some accolades. Harrison certainly had a lot of accolades. He was a third-round draft pick, as you mentioned, and a football star. But you had developed a really strong career. Did your team win the North Coast Section Championship when you were in high school?
Our senior year, we won it. Yeah, and the first team ever for Camp Lindo High School to win it, to win the North Coast Section, which is crazy, thinking of the talent that they had before we got there, that they had never been able to do it. That just goes to show you how hard baseball it is to win. But we won it in 1988.
Okay, so now this leads to the next event, shall we call it. Now, I've been to your house, okay, and you had mentioned that your dad and your mother were USC graduates and USC fans, and you grew up going down to the Coliseum and watching Rod Dato's teams play against Cal and Stanford when they would come up, or you'd go down south. Your house looked like Heritage Hall.
Yeah.
So I know that you wanted to be a Trojan. And USC had a coach at that time named Mike Gillespie. And he was recruiting and in fact, he had this is right around the time that he had come in. Bob Milano had been at Cal for about 10 years. Mike Gillespie had only been at USC for a couple of years. And he was in the process of recruiting a really good club. And he recruited a first baseman. I think his name was Mike Robertson from Anaheim Hills, Canyon Hills, I believe, and Anaheim Hills, if I've got my memory correct. He was a good ball player. He was a left-handed hitter. He was a good fielder. But apparently it was between him and you, and he went for Mike Robertson. How closely, if at all, did Mike Gillespie talk to you, recruit you, or consider you, or vice versa?
Yeah, so they recruited me. Not I don't know if they had Mike, rated higher than me. They also had a guy named Murph Proctor, sort of a pitcher, first baseman that was a year ahead of me. Actually, Robbie and I played together in AAA. We were on the same team one year in AAA, but USC recruited me. I don't know if they thought, because I made it known that, hey, I wanted to go to USC. That was my dream school at the time. If they thought that would be easy or to get me or not. And so at the time, I was Miami and USC were the two main schools that were recruiting me. And USC came up and watched me play, and I hit a home run and a double, and I came in and picked up the save. And, I'm going home thinking like, well, that sealed the deal. I'm going and stuff like that. And, then they had my whole high school schedule, and they said, well, we want you to come down on a recruiting visit this weekend, or they gave me the date of the weekend. And I said, well, I can't do that. We're playing in a tournament in Orlando, Florida. You guys know that. And I'm not going to miss our high school tournament that we're playing in Orlando, so I can't make it. Is there another date? And they said, no, there isn't. That's the only date that we would offer you to come down. And I said, well, obviously I've seen the campus and everything, and
yeah,
I'm not going to come down. I'm not going to miss a tournament.
But not to interrupt, John, but at this point, what more do you need to see of the USC campus?
Right.
To know about USC that
right.
You be there? So
then they called me, and they said, hey, we would like to offer you a walk-on spot. And, I said, I'm not going to do that. I have a scholarship offer from Miami. And my sister goes there now, and 2 USC tuitions, even back then, at the same time, was a lot of money. And I said, I'm not going to do that. So I called my high school coach, and I called my Legion coach, and I said, hey, I'm going to commit to University of Miami, and USC just wants me to walk on. And so they both said, are you sure you want to do that? And I was like, well, I'm talking to some other teams, but it doesn't seem that serious. So I called the next day to University of Miami, and back then, technology being what it was, I left a message with Ron Fraser's secretary,
Yeah.
and I said, "Hey, this is Jon Zuber. I'd like to. Can he call me back?" And Miami didn't call me back for 2 days, and in that span, my high school coach and Legion coach apparently made some phone calls, because in that 2 day span, I got offers from, if I remember right, Cal, Santa Clara, Fresno, San Diego, Nevada, Pepperdine, and maybe there might have been one or two more in there too. So
Those are some pretty good programs.
yeah. So then when Miami finally called back, I didn't commit. I just said I wanted to make sure everything was where it was, and that I was taking a trip to Cal and Santa Clara and Pepperdine and Fresno, and I would let them know when that was over.
Okay, so enter Bob Milano, head baseball coach, University of California. A little bit about Bob. Very old school guy, Bishop O'Dowd High School, played at Cal, did not really play professional ball, went into coaching, started in high school, became an assistant under a coach named Jackie Jensen, who was a better player than he was a coach. Got the head job and really could recruit. That was his thing. And in 1988, he went to the College World Series for the second time. He had been in the College World Series in 1980, and in 1988, he had Jeff Kent on his team. He went to the College World Series. So this probably had to impress you, that Cal had been to Omaha in 1988. USC had not been to Omaha in 10 years, since 1978. They'd had some down years, and Gillespie was just trying to build that program back up. So I would think that Bob Milano would feel pretty good about his chances of recruiting you. So talk about that experience.
Yeah, I think the first person from Cal to identify me was John Hughes, the pitching coach at the time. And now since Cal, he's been a scout. Now he's a scout for the A's. But I think he was the first one, and then he told seven, and they would come out and watch. The funny story, I think it was when I was a sophomore in high school, maybe, USC came up and played Cal in football. So that must have been 85, 86. And Cal beat USC in football at Memorial Stadium that year. And I remember leaving and walking to the car and being all upset. I had all my USC gear on and everything and all that stuff. And I remember telling my dad, I'm like, there's no way I would ever come to college here. These guys are, I just said, there's no way. And through the whole process, the final two schools that I was down to ended up being Cal and Pepperdine. And Pepperdine was my first choice. And I went down, they were my last visit. And there had been some guys from Camp Lindo High School that had gone down to Pepperdine. And so I'd known some about that. And I went and I watched them play Loyola. And then after the game, Dave Gorey, their head coach, Coach Gorey, said, "Hey, I need to let you know this before you make any decisions, but I'm retiring after this year, and they're not going to hire my assistant coach as the head coach." And he goes, "I want you to know that before making a decision." And I didn't know who the head coach was going to be, and that sort of flipped my decision to go to Cal.
What about the role of Mike Harrison? Was he brought in to help recruit you? Did he talk to you on the side? Hey, I'm going to Cal. Why don't you come with me? I'd love to have you with me. What was going on in that regard?
No, I mean, we would talk about it. He was really interested in Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was recruiting him pretty heavily, and he went back there and loved it and everything. And he ended up committing to Cal probably a week or two before I did. But there was no really talk about it. We went on our official visit together, but there was no pressure to do it. Maybe in my mind, knowing that he was there, made it an easier choice for me. I would assume.
I would think so. Okay, so you come to Cal against all odds, really, and you described how a lot of things need to fall into place, or maybe not fall into place for a decision, which is really interesting because a lot of people enjoy this show because it gets into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of how the game works, how recruiting works, how scouting works, how players make decisions, and sometimes decisions are made for them. So it seems like it was destiny that you and Mike Harrison would come to Cal. You get there, 1989 is your freshman year. How much did you play as a freshman and in your sophomore year of 1990?
Yeah, so in '89. We got there obviously in the fall of '88, and that was the year that Coach Milano was coaching or helping an assistant for the Olympics. And so, like the first 2 or 3 weeks, we didn't even see Seven. He wasn't there. But virtually everybody, or the vast majority of that '88 team, returned for '89. And so we were supposed to be, we were going back to Omaha, right? We got the whole pitching staff basically returned, and almost all the position players returned, with the exception of, I think, like Darren Lewis. And so, I didn't know how much I was going to play at all. I just sort of, went about my business, and I ended up playing. I think I got about 100 at bats. And pitched a little bit, on a Tuesday game or a mop-up game or something like that. Mostly as a designated hitter. They had a fifth-year senior at first base, Brad DeJardin, and Brad was a really good first baseman, also a left-handed left guy, really smooth around the base. And I was really fortunate, actually, that he was there, because I learned a lot from him, just watching how he went about his business and things like that. And so I played some, but not, not anything that.
What did the pitching look like to your eyes coming out of high school?
Obviously it was, better, facing Mike Mussina and some guys like that.
McDowell.
McDowell was gone.
Oh, he was gone. Yeah, you're right.
He was gone.
He was awesome.
But we had, Arizona had Scott Erickson and another guy, Lance Dixon.
Randy Powers at USC.
Randy Powers was at SC.
Yeah.
So it was different for sure. But I don't know the way that my mind works, or how I played. I never got caught up in who was on the mound. I just got caught up in how can I make it the hardest at bat for them? How can I, whether it's ugly or pretty or whatever, how can I do something to help the team, or to get a hit, or anything like that? So to me, when people would say, "Oh, you're facing Mussina," I'd be like, "Cool." He's got good stuff, but he still has to throw it over 17 inches of the plate, and I still have to be on balance, and I have to still stay behind the ball and stay inside the ball, and I just have to do my job. Whether it's him or somebody else. And so That's sort of how I went about it. Is more or less competing against myself than the other guys, and wanting to not go back to the dugout feeling like I let my team down.
Okay, so this leads us to 1991, and this is where our paths cross. There had been a player, he's one of my best friends, kind of is similar to you in that his name starts with a Z. His name is Greg Zanino. He was known as the Z-Man, and I think you were known as the Z-Man too within your circles. Seems like anybody with the name of Zuber or anything with a Z or Zaccaro, everyone's going to call them the Z-Man. Anyway, he had recommended me to Bob Milano. He and Milano were very close. They were very good friends, even took vacations. And Milano was looking for a bullpen coach and a batting practice pitcher. And so I was brought on, and I was very excited. I wasn't sure really what I was going to do in terms of my future. I had done other things. I kind of failed at other things. I was at crossroads in my life. Do I really want to be a baseball coach? And I figured, well, a place like Cal, which is really high level and very high commitment, this is where I'm going to learn if this is something I want to do. And at the beginning, Coach Milano sent me on some scouting trips. And I went down to Southern California and I saw Cal State Fullerton play Stanford, and both teams were on our schedule. So I did up a nice scouting report of both teams. And I came back, and we had another assistant named Bob Ralston, who you knew very well. And we'll get into all these personalities. And before I could do my scouting report to 7, as Bob Milano was referred to because he wore the number 7, Bobby says, what does Stanford look like? And I said, they look really good. They look like the Oakland A's. So, Bob, we come into the office, and Coach Milano says, so what does Stanford look like? And Bobby goes, Steve says they look like the Oakland A's. And, Coach Milano just kind of stared at us like we're not intimidated by anybody. And I said, well, I don't really think they look like the Oakland A's, coach. That wasn't in my report. Bobby had made it look like I was saying, well, there's no chance that we're going to beat Stanford, which gets to how that season eventually plays out. But I remember very early on, before any of the games, we're practicing. And I didn't really know a lot about the players. I had a media guide, and I would read up who they were. And so I knew who you were from that respect. But I remember you were talking to one of the guys, and you were saying, yeah, you got to come to my house. My mom's a really good cook. And you had this smile on your face. You were very easygoing. I thought, this guy seems like a really nice guy. And then the season starts, and we start playing games. And you would pop out or ground out or something like that, and you would go ballistic. And you would throw your helmet and the bat, and you would scream things out at the pitcher, what you were going to do to him the next time. And I said to Ralston, I said, holy cow, this guy is the most intense ball player I've ever seen. I realized that as soon as I saw you. And in all the years I've ever been around sports, you were as intense a competitor as anyone I ever saw. Where did this come from? Was this your dad? Was this just something that did you drive yourself? What was going on?
Yeah. Some of the stuff, obviously, I regret. But the competitive side of me, I think, was a little bit, driven by my dad, and just knowing, hey, don't back down to anybody. But I think what really was I was always the smallest guy. Mm-hmm. And so it was easy to be picked on. It was easy to be overlooked. It was easy for all that stuff to happen. I mean, shoot, when I was on JV at Camp Lindo, and once in a blue moon, we got to take batting practice on the field. When I was a freshman, all the varsity guys, when I got up to take batting practice, all came into the infield. There wasn't one guy standing in the outfield. And so those were always things that I felt like I had to prove myself. And I guess it was just sort of something inside me that probably doesn't work right. That just drove me to it. And so that's just how I was. And I don't think it was very healthy. But like I said a little bit earlier, the one thing that I never could take or would never be able to live down is if somebody on my team, if my coach yelled at me, or if my coach said something to me or whatever, that's one thing. But if somebody on my team ever told me I wasn't playing hard enough or I wasn't pulling my weight, that would probably be the worst thing that somebody could say to me in my life. That would just destroy me. And so my job was to go out there and to do everything I possibly could to try to help my team. And whatever was asked of me, whatever that was, and I wanted to do that. I never wanted to let them down. And so I think it would get to me if I did fail, that I would get upset, in that way. But that was more or less the driving factor, was looking up and down the dugout and saying, those are my guys. Those that's it. There's nobody else that's more important than these guys on this team to me, and I'm going to do everything I can to try to help as much as I can.
Well, I think that attitude was one that was carried over by most of your teammates, and I recognized that early on. I remember just watching the team practice, and I said to Coach Milano, I said, maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is a special team. And as the season played out, this is in 1991, we kept defying expectations. And I kept reminding him, or he kept recalling to me what I had said to him early in the season, and saying, yeah, I think you're right. This is a special team. So just talking about this team, we talked about Mike Harrison. He was the catcher. He was everything that you could possibly want. Big, strong. He had a tremendous arm. He hit for power. He was really more of a line drive hitter, but he could hit for power, could do everything on a baseball field, and he was a leader. Okay, you were the first baseman. You were a slick fielding first baseman. You had a good arm. You were really strong making the throw to second base on the ground ball to first, to short, back to first, double play. And because you were a pitcher as well, and so you had a very strong arm. We had a shortstop who really materialized, and he was a good friend of yours. His name was Chris Klapinski. Chris was very strong defensively. And I remember a conversation with you guys, I think during the NCAA tournament, we were with Bob Ralston. Bob Ralston was one of the assistant coaches. He was a fiery guy himself who had been an All-American at the University of Arizona, played a number of years in the A's organization, had gotten fairly high in the A's organization. And I remember Chris talking about, I don't know if I want to go into the minors, just play a couple of years in the minors and then go home. And I remember saying to him, hey, man, it's a great experience. Even if you don't make it, it's something you're going to need to challenge yourself. And he did go in, and he reached the major leagues. You had a third baseman named Dan Chalowski. And if that name is familiar, his son, Rock Chalowski, is probably the best prospect in the United States of America at this time. He's the star shortstop for the UCLA Bruins. They're ranked number one. They're favored to win the College World Series, and he's probably going to be the number one draft pick in June. And then we had a player, help me out with his name. His last name was Luke. What was his first name?
Matt Luke.
Matt Luke. He was from Southern California. He was like Mike Harrison. He was like a Viking god, tall, built like you couldn't believe. He was in the weight room every day, really hitting it hard. I used to throw a lot of batting practice to you guys, and you guys were out there early, taking a lot of BP down in the cages down the first base line. He was very dedicated. And there were other really good players on this team, but those are some of the highlight players. This was an unbelievably talented team. It might have not have been a complete team in terms of starting pitching. There were a couple guys who had some talent on the mound. If there had been more starting pitching, I think this was a team that might have really challenged in the College World Series. What's your assessment of that club?
Well, I think we have to go back a little bit when we talked about 89 and we didn't talk about 90. In 89, at one point we were ranked third in the country at I think 25-3. And then we finished 36-24. We just fell off a cliff. All our pitchers got hurt. And we didn't even make the regionals. Then all those guys graduated. And in 1990, all those guys that you talked about, Chalowski, Klipinski, Matt Luke, Troy Penix, Harry, myself, you can go on, Reed Newman, all those guys, we were on a 1990 team that had the worst record ever in Pac-10 history. We were 3-27 in league, and we were 18-42 overall. And all we were a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, and we were getting our heads pounded in. We could score. We would lose games 16-12, 14-11, things like that. And then we all came back. And in today's atmosphere of college athletics, that wouldn't happen. But we all weathered something that was horrible to weather in terms of wins and losses. And it brought us so close together that we loved each other. We loved each other on the field. We loved hanging out with each other off the field. And then 91, we just got a year older, a year bigger, a year more experience. But the talent was always there. I mean, Dan Chalowski was unbelievable talent, power, speed, could play everywhere. And a lot of our personalities were the same type of red ass personalities that, fight you at the drop of a hat, would not give an inch, all of that stuff. And so we were lucky in the sense that a lot of our personalities gelled together. But we were such good friends off the field, and we cared about each other so much. And, the thing about Coach Milano was I have to imagine that our personalities were very difficult to coach. And sometimes to be around, but he let us be ourselves. I mean, the whole you and everybody in the coaching staff let us be ourselves for the most part. I mean, yeah, you had to reel us in on occasion, but that team, I mean, top to bottom, if you were a pitcher, you did not want to face that team. The hitters on that team were insanely good.
You mentioned that you had struggled the previous year. Tell me where you played collegiate summer ball prior to that.
So after my freshman year, I played for the Matsu Miners in Alaska. Okay. After my sophomore year, I played for the Hyannis Mets. I think they're now the Hyannis. They renamed the team the Hyannis something in the Cape Cod League. And then after my junior year, I played in the Shenandoah Valley League for the Harrisonburg Turks.
When you played in the Cape Cod League, did you experience a sort of, I don't, culture shock isn't the right word, a baseball shock, I guess, when you had to hit with a wooden bat? Yeah,
it was like a punch in the face. I'd never hit with a wood bat before in my life. Now kids in high school are using wood bats in the summer and things like that. And I'd never used one in my life, and I quite honestly got dominated. I didn't hit the way I could hit. I didn't know how to handle the bat, and it was such a wake up call that I needed to go back and figure out a little bit different stuff on my swing. I needed to get in the weight room and get stronger if I really wanted to continue to play. So as much as I struggled back there and didn't have a great season for the team of Hyannis, it was one of those things where you're sort of at a fork in the road, right? You could sort of say, you know what, I'm happy with what I'm doing and that's fine. Or you can say, look, if I want to get better, I need to figure some stuff out. I need to make some adjustments. I need to do better off the field and sort of reshape my swing a little bit. And so that's what I tried to do.
Were most of your teammates, I know that Coach Milano has been involved in USA baseball. Were most of your teammates played in these collegiate summer leagues as well?
Yeah, I think a couple like Harry, Mike played for Team USA. Klipinski played back in Cape Cod because at our first 2 years, our pitching coach John Hughes would go back and coach. I think that he coached at, and so he would take some Cal guys back to Kituit with him. He was probably sick and tired of me after the season, so he didn't want me to go back with him. He wanted to ship me off to somebody else. And then there were some guys that went and played in the Jayhawk League. I know there were some guys that played for the Humboldt Crabs up at Humboldt and in Alaska. So
I know Coach Milano coached at Humboldt at one point.
Yeah, I know for me, I wanted to go every summer, one, just for the experience. I wanted to experience everything that college baseball could offer me. And I just thought it was great being able to play with guys from other programs and doing all that. And it was a really fun time.
Yeah, it really is. That's a great experience. Okay, so in 1991, as you know, I had gone to USC. So I used to talk to you about USC. We'd kind of keep it on the down low. I think I had a USC license plate, and Coach Milano said, if I see that plate one more time, I'm going to bust it off of your car. Well, okay, so he had to keep that on the down low, so to speak. So we go down to Los Angeles, and we're playing the Trojans. This is a very good USC team, and I knew and was friends with a lot of guys on that team, including Jeff Cirillo, Jackie Nickel. I don't know if Randy Powers was still there, Mark Smith, and Brett Boone. I think he was gone, but I'd known all these guys. And we go down to play. I don't know if you recall this, but we're down at Dado Field, and before the game, we come out for batting practice, and there's a very attractive girl taking batting practice in the cages down the third base line. And someone asks, what's up with that? And someone said, oh, that's Madonna. She's practicing for a baseball movie, which was obviously going to be A League of Their Own. So I think half of the Cal guys were sort of, wow, this really is the Hollywood school, isn't it? So the game starts, and SC was really good, and someone throws at somebody, and I believe it was you, and I want to say you started it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can correct me on this, but a fight breaks out. And next thing I know is we're all running onto the field, and this is a really weird experience for me because I'm wearing this Cal uniform, but I know everybody at USC. And, Mark Smith and Cirillo are going, what are you doing out here? Well, I guess I'm pretending to be in a baseball fight. Do you recall that fight? And if so, what started it?
I don't recall that one. I'm sorry.
It was one of those things.
I don't. We got into a few. I remember one against Stanford. I remember one against Irvine. I think we cleared the benches against Wichita State in the regionals. For some reason,
right.
maybe my mind doesn't has blocked that one out of USC. I know we had some battles down there.
Yeah, no, it was a battle, and it was a really strong. It was probably Gillespie's best team up until that point. That team actually should have won the College World Series. They managed to lose to Hawaii in a regional that they hosted. They had it won, and they blew it in the late innings. And we were, on the other hand, playing in Wichita against Ohio State and Baylor and some Wichita State in the College World Series. But let me preface, it gets down to the end of the season. Now, I mentioned earlier that Stanford, I had given the scouting report and said they looked really good, and they were. And this was a Mark Marcus team during an era in which they were as good as anybody in college baseball, and the Pacific 10 Conference was as good as anybody in college baseball at that particular time. So we did not beat Stanford. I think we were swept by them. We go down to Stanford at the end of the season, and we need to win the final game. We've lost 2 games, and this is it. We have to win. It's the last Sunday. And I'll never forget this game as long as I live. First, let me talk about Dan Chalowski. He's playing third base. I think you were pitching. We'll get into that in a second. And there were, I want to say, the tying and go-ahead runs were on base. And there's 2 outs. And there's a line drive down the third base line. And Dan Chalowski makes one of the greatest plays that these eyes have ever seen in baseball. He extends himself and just barely nabs it and makes the catch against the third base line into the chalk and the dust and the chalk. It was so old school, and it was such a play. And I mean, he was an All-American. He's in the Cal Baseball Hall of Fame, as you are, or the Cal Athletics Hall of Fame, as you are, and both so well deserving, such a talent. And so it comes down to the final inning, and you get brought in from relief. You're no longer playing first base, and it's you throwing to your high school teammate from Camp Olindo, Mike Harrison. And you just gave it everything you had, and they had some really good hitters, and somehow you managed to battle it through and hold that lead in the last inning. Talk about that last inning, holding it against Stanford and getting Cal into the NCAA playoffs.
Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, going back to
at the Sunken Diamond too.
I mean, going back to the 6-pack, I mean, you played each other 6 times. You learned to hate each other, which hate with a respect though. That game actually was the first game I ever started pitching. And so I threw a complete game that game against Stanford. And so that when Chow made that play, that was me on the mound.
Okay.
And so somehow I made it through 9 innings, and that last inning, I remember having to face Dave McCarty, and I mean, they had Jeffrey Hammonds on. They were stacked, obviously, which Stanford always was back then. But I remember throwing a little slider to McCarty, and he flew out to Matt Luke in right field, I remember that just the thing I remember most is everybody went crazy. But Mike and I met like in between home plate and the pitching mound and we just had a huge hug. And then everybody just started jumping like we had won the World Series, right? Because we knew that was a game that we had to win. If we won it, we were in the regionals. If we lost it, we were not going to make the regionals. And so, in a sense, it was a regional final game, just to get there. So I remember that. I remember the bus ride home.
Yes, I remember it well.
You know, probably we shouldn't have stopped. You know, we stopped and got a few beverages, which probably wouldn't be allowed today. But that memory is one that's etched in my mind. And the guys on the team and how happy everybody was from everything that we'd been through, to see it all come together was just an incredible feeling.
Speaking of bus rides, well, I'm going to go back a couple of months in that season when I really felt the team came together. Was we played Fresno State early. This was in Fresno, and it was like in February, and we played in like sort of those tule fogs that they get in Fresno. And the last game was played in front of a packed house at, I can't remember the field that they have at Fresno, but this nice ball field that they had. And as I recall, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but as I recall, we're winning 13-12. You might have been pitching. Okay. We're winning 13-12, and they've got two guys in scoring position, or they have two guys on base. And there's a base hit to right field. I think it was either Reed Newman or Matt Luke throws the ball, and you're either on the mound or you're doing the relay from first. So you're going to have to help me with this. There's a throw home. Harrison is catching, and they've waved not just the first runner, but the second runner around. So this is like something out of Major League. The first runner and the second runner are right behind each other, coming at Harrison. The throw comes in. Harrison, so athletic, makes the catch, sweeps with the tag. Here comes the second runner, sweeps with the tag. Both guys are out. The game is over. We win the game. Do you recall that play? Am I recalling that? Am I, Carl, recalling that correctly, John?
I think it was Matt Luke in right. Okay. And I remember, I don't remember it exactly. I do remember that happening.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of it, like, if we had TV coverage and ESPN Plus and the ACC network and whatever networks there are, right? Yeah. Back when we played, there would be some incredible things that happened, just that would blow your mind. But Fresno was always that rival, and they were always good, and going down there always packed the house, and a lot of noise coming from their crowd and things like that. I do remember Mike tagging out two guys on the same.
Yeah. It was exactly like the play in Major League where John Berenger tags out two guys. Now, as I recall, we're in the bus going back, and I'm still sort of getting to know you guys, and you are walking up and down the bus interviewing your teammates in the voice of Vin Scully. Hello, everybody. This is Vin Scully. I'm with the Cal Bears. I like to talk to Dan Chalowski, who went 3 for 4 in our victory over Fresno State. Dan, any feelings about and you're talking to people in this, and I remember thinking, boy, there are two different Jon Zubers. There's the Jon Zuber on the field who is intensely intense, and then there's this fun-loving side. So why don't you talk a little bit about that side of you? Was that something that sort of helped cut the edge a little bit from your intensity during the games?
I think so. I mean, I had to have something to sort of release to. I don't know. Maybe I have a split personality. Maybe I need to go see a doctor or something like that. But it was just something that was fun. At that point in my life, I thought I wanted to be an announcer for baseball, and obviously Vin Scully was somebody that I grew up listening to, and as ironic as it may be, or as funny as it may be, he called my first major league hit. Vin Scully did. We were playing the Dodgers, and I got it on tape. But I mean, off the field, I tried to separate it as much as I could. I probably didn't do as good of a job as I could have at that time, or throughout my whole career for that matter. But it's, hey, when you win and when you have success, we knew that just from the years prior, how hard that was. And so when anything that we could celebrate or have fun with or laugh with, I think we tried to do it. At that time, I guess I wasn't as I was a little bit more outspoken than I am now. There's no way I would probably do that now. But back then it seemed like the right thing to do, and it was fun. And
I thought, John, I thought it was hilarious, and I think you would have been a very good announcer, color man in baseball. You've got a good voice, and you know the game. So I have no doubt that had you pursued that, you would have had success. But we get to the NCAA regionals, and it's in Wichita. And Wichita State at that time was hosting it. They had a beautiful field. And the other teams were Baylor, Ohio State, and us. I do remember the opening game, we played Baylor, and Baylor's coach, I don't remember his last name, maybe you do. His first name was Mickey. And Bob Ralston and I seek him out before the game and introduce ourselves. And he said that he had been the scout who had scouted Nolan Ryan. Now, I know if you go and look at the records, there's another guy who gets credit for signing Nolan Ryan, but he was probably the national cross-checker. This guy had probably been the local guy who had scouted him. And he had said that Nolan Ryan only threw 86 miles an hour as a senior in high school. So that just tells you, as a coach today talking to young kids in high school, you can tell them that story and say, hey, it's all about how your body is going to grow. How good are you going to be? Do you want to be really good when you're 17, or do you want to be really good when you're 22? Because that's a good example of how an athlete develops. But the team did very well in the playoffs, but didn't make it, eventually lose to Wichita State. In 1992, you come back and you lead the team to the College World Series. And I remember you guys played Miami, the team that had recruited you, in the opener. You had that game won. You were up 3-0 in the fifth or sixth, maybe even the seventh inning, and they came back. Had you won that game, especially the way the CWS was aligned in those days, which is different than it is now because it's become such a television event, you guys might have won the first College World Series for Cal since 1958. So talk about that game.
The Miami game?
The Miami game on national television in 1992.
Yeah. Shoot, Miami was, I think, going into it, the number 1 seed. And we were the 8th seed. To get to the regional, we went to Gainesville. And at the time, University of Florida was the number 1 ranked team in the country. And we got through that. But the Miami game was, first of all, to play in the College World Series is such an incredible dream come true, with the crowd and, the old Rosenblatt Stadium and things like that. And again, we had a team that could hit. We had, we were pretty heavy left-handed because that 92 team didn't have Mike Harrison and Dan Chalowski. They both signed. And so
you had to carry that team, John.
Well, it's Troy Penix and Klipinski and Reed Newman and Matty Luke. And we had such a good team, great guys, but they started Silvio Sensale, a lefty, against us. And we put up a few runs on him. And then they brought in who was their ace was Danny Graves, who ended up being a great closer for the Cincinnati Reds, I think, and maybe Cleveland as well. But they brought in Danny, and then all of a sudden, that stopped us a little bit. They came back, and we went extra innings. We went 13 innings, and I was on the mound in the 13th inning and gave up a sacrifice fly to Charles Johnson, and we lost 5-4. And then I think it was the very next day, we had to come back and play Florida State, and we lost to Florida State 4-3, and that was that. But I mean, that Miami game was just, if you go back and watch it, 13 innings of just action and stress, and I mean, it was one heck of a ball game to be a part of.
Yeah, it really was. It was a great event in the history of Cal baseball for sure. So after that, you get drafted. Tell us who drafted you and in what round.
Yeah, so I was drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies. I think it was the 12th or 13th round. And they drafted me as a pitcher. Like we were talking about earlier, when I was being recruited, most people wanted me as a pitcher. And so the Phillies drafted me. Obviously, I was a senior, so it was a pretty easy sign. You know, do you want to go play or you don't want to go play? And so I signed my contract, and they sent me back to Clearwater, Florida for a little mini camp. And they had me throw a bullpen, and I, turned around and told the pitching coach, I'm like, hey man, I threw more innings my senior year than I had in the 3 years combined. I go, I'm hanging pretty good. I just got off throwing, about 12 innings in the regional, and then in the World Series, and it was like a week later, right? And he goes, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We're just checking, things. And so he goes, we'll throw 30 pitches. We'll throw 15 from the windup and 15 from the stretch. And I'm like, okay. And so my first 15 pitches, and I mean, I didn't throw all that hard anyhow. I was like 83, 85. If I was hitting 75 in the bullpen, it was crazy. And so after 15 pitches, I turned around to the pitching coach to say, hey, you want me to go from the stretch now? And he's sitting there, he's got his head in his hand, just shaking his head like, what the heck did we just do? Who is this? This guy's terrible. And so I finished my next 15 pitches, and he goes, hey, you hit too, don't you? And I said, yeah, actually I would prefer it. But you guys drafted me as a pitcher. And he goes, why don't you go over to that field over there, tell him I sent you, and put you in the lineup. And so I went over to one of the fields. We were playing a game, an inter squad or whatever it was, and they put me in the lineup, and I think I went 4 for 5 with 2 doubles. And 3 nights later, I was hitting third, playing left field in Batavia, New York, and didn't really pitch again.
So let me ask you this, and this is, for those of you playing on your travel ball team or just young players, you're at this point, I'm assuming 22, 23 years old. You've gotten through your 4 years of college ball, some really good collegiate summer ball. You've gone through really good high school coaching and playing American League. You are a young man who's been well coached and well schooled in the game. At this point, what does Jon Zuber assess and say, what do I need to do to get myself to the next level? What are my abilities? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How do I move? Because you're now facing the best of the best. You're looking at minor league ball, pro ball, spring training. You're seeing major leaguers and high level minor leaguers. So you have to make an assessment of yourself. And you're a smart guy. You know baseball. What do you say to yourself, and what are your coaches saying to you?
So the first thing I said to myself is, I said, I'm going to keep playing as long as I keep moving up, which was naive because I spent 7 years in AAA. Wow. But I knew that I had to get a little more athletic. I knew I had to get stronger. And be myself. I had to learn. You have to learn and listen and pay attention a lot. I probably learned more from watching other guys and talking to them about, hey, what did you do with this swing, or how do how do you pull the ball more, or how do you do this, or how do you do that? And I asked a lot of questions, but I knew I had sort of a foundation of my swing and my approach that I didn't want to leave and I didn't want to lose, but I wanted to be able to add to it. And so it was just sort of taking pieces and trying to plug them in. And some years they worked, and some years that I had to discard them. But eventually I got a pretty good foundation of how to do little things. I never wanted to give up what I knew I did well to try to get something else. And I see that today in a lot of baseball, which is some people like, I think some purists don't, is I never wanted to give up my average to try to hit for more power.
Right.
Maybe if I did, but the times that I tried, I just couldn't figure it out. And I didn't feel like I had enough time. Like if I didn't hit 300, I wasn't going to be around. They were going to find somebody else. And so I think it's just being true to yourself, but also being open to ideas, but know yourself enough that you can incorporate ideas, but not lose what you have. In today's game, that I think the coaching and just what you see in the videos and everything, the exit speeds, everything. I don't know. They obviously didn't have it when I played. I don't know if that would have been too much for me. I would have too much in my mind or not. At the end of the day, it was just like, hey man, there's a pitcher out there and I'm in the batter's box and it's me versus him. And that's it. And it's there's nobody else that can help me. And I just have to find a way to hit the ball hard and to have a good at bat against him. So that's sort of what I thought, but I knew I had to get stronger. I knew I had to do, and I played in the steroid era when guys were, they would come back and you would look at them and be like, holy cow, what happened? Well, you knew what happened, but, I played in that era where strength really, so I needed to get in the weight room a lot more. And I found the funny thing is I found such solitude in being able to work, just to go to the cage and hit off the batting tee or to play long toss or do whatever it was. I found so much solitude and gratitude in that.
Mhm.
And with that, I think it built confidence and it built an even more stubbornness because baseball is going to knock you down. It's a game of failure. And there's times where you want to say, is this even worth it? And at those times I found that with the work that I put in, it would always come back sort of to say, a little voice in my head is like, you've given up too much of your time and you've worked too hard, I guess, to just quit. And so that was my thought going into it. The different levels to me were like early minor leagues, short season A ball was a lot almost like, Bull Durham in a sense. And then once you started to get to AA and AAA, you had a lot more, a lot of different views. Some guys were a little down on the game because they'd been up. They think they were treated wrong by the organization. They got sent down. They knew that the injuries were building up, or they traded for some guy in front of them. When you were still 22 years old in A ball, you were just sort of still out there just playing. And then as you got older, you realized it was a little bit more of a business.
What you say makes so much sense, and it reminds me of a conversation I had with the aforementioned Greg Zanino. We were talking about you, and Greg, I think, was scouting for Gary Hughes with the Miami Marlins right around the time that you were Florida Marlins, right around the time that you were draft eligible. And I just flat said, you should draft this guy. This guy is a competitor. This guy, and I just heard all the pre-Moneyball stuff, and that you later heard with Moneyball about what you're supposed to look like, what your body is supposed to look like. Mike Harrison. Okay, well, that's what you're supposed to look like. Well, not everyone looks like Mike Harrison. And I said to Greg, I said, as far as I'm concerned, this is a Mark Grace type of player, because he was convinced, well, if you're a first baseman, you got to hit 35 homers. Not everyone's going to hit 35 home runs. Mark Grace didn't hit 35 homers. He batted 290 to 310, drove in 80 runs, and played great defense, and was a great teammate, and played on some winning teams. I said, that's the kind of player that Zuber is. And, I had some conversations with him that really I couldn't convince him, because, those guys think they know everything. And you're talking about the attitude of the players. There comes a point where they do become cynical as you get older. And, I knew some players that were in AAA, AA. Chuck Fick, for instance, who was a good friend of mine. By the time I played with him, he'd been with the Expos, and then he was with the A's, and he was still in AA. He wasn't sure where his future was. And I remember these conversations like, wow, I mean, this guy's talking about quitting baseball. How could you ever do that? So, what happens with you? But you do eventually get to the major leagues. I believe it was 1996. Talk about the culture of playing in the major leagues for the Phillies, and how long you were there, who the manager was, some of your teammates, and what that experience was like.
I a lot of times I wonder if I played in a different era, even now, because I always walked more than I struck out. My on-base percentage was always good, and all that stuff. But yeah, I got called up in '96. Jim Fregosi was the manager of the Phillies at that point, and the Phillies weren't very good. I didn't even go to Major League spring training, but my AAA manager was a guy named Butch Hobson, and Butch,
Alabama quarterback.
Yeah, Butch absolutely loved how I played, I guess, and had a lot of good things to say about me. And then Greg Jeffries was the first baseman at the time for Philadelphia, and he injured his thumb. He broke his thumb, and then I got called up, and they said, "Hey, you're going to start against right-handers until Jeffries gets back." And my first game, we started against the St. Louis Cardinals against Andy Bennis or Alan Bennis.
Yeah. I saw that game, John. I was on TV.
And I went over. I had to come in. Eckersley closed out the game, and I mean, it was just, and I went over, and I didn't start again. I got sent down like 12, 13 days later, something like that. And I figured, well, I'm gonna be that guy that has a 0 batting average. But then I got called up again after they made a trade in July for they traded Todd Zeal and Pete Incaviglia to the Orioles, and I got called up and finished the year up there and actually hit pretty well.
Thank God I didn't have that 0-0-0 batting average in the baseball encyclopedia.
Yeah, so it was different because when you got called up back then, especially with the Phillies and Fregosi and that coaching staff, it was really, really old school, and I didn't really know any of the guys that much, and so old school like that. When you're the rookie, and you're treated like the rookie, and you don't talk unless you're spoken to, and things like that. And I just didn't feel very comfortable. And eventually, I started feeling more comfortable, and did better at the end of that year in '96.
Did you get back to the big leagues?
I did. I got back in '98. 97, they didn't call me up at 97.
Tough.
I had a really good year in '97 too, and so that was disappointing. But '98, um, '98, I got called up, and I was hitting so well in AAA. I mean, it was the best I'd ever hit. I was driving the ball. My slugging percentage was pretty high. And I got called up there in the first game against the Brewers. I think I went 2 for 3. I hit a ball off the wall. And then I didn't play for like 3 or 4 days. We went to New York. I got in New York. I got in at the end of the game. I actually hit a home run at Yankee Stadium against David Cohn, and they just didn't play me, for whatever reason. And I just, I sort of lost what I had the feeling going, but I was still up there, and I was pinch hitting, and I was doing pretty good when I'd pinch hit, but it's funny when you're a bench player. Like, I could take batting practice and know, I'm like, man, I'm locked in right now. And then the next week you wouldn't feel as good. You would just know it. And then they sent me down the night before we came out to San Francisco. They sent me down, which was too bad. But
all your friends would have been at the ball game, huh?
Yeah, but then they brought me back up again, and I finished the year with them. So those were my 2 years that I was lucky enough to put on a major league uniform.
Well, you were a Major League Baseball player. No one could take that away from you. And you didn't bat 000 in the baseball encyclopedia.
That's right.
In the time we have left, Jon, I want to address 2 things. One, you did return to Cal as an assistant coach. Why don't you talk about that period of time?
Yeah, it was great. I had retired from the game, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was 33 years old. I just retired, and my body was beaten up pretty good. And I coached 1 year in high school, and then Dave Esker reached out and asked me if I'd be interested in coaching the hitters at Cal. It took me a long time to say yes. I didn't know if I wanted to do it, but I did. And we coached I got the opportunity to coach some great players. I mean, we hit and guys, first round draft picks, guys that played in the big leagues. One that's still there now, Marcus Semien, Mark Canna, Brett Jackson was a first round draft pick. Jeff Coburnis played in the big leagues. There's Alan Craig, Brennan Bosch. There was a lot of guys, and I was so fortunate to be able to do it. I did it for 5 years. And I actually thought we were doing really well. We put up the best hitting numbers since our 1992 team. And then I got let go. Coach Esker let me go, which was pretty painful. But the kids that I was able to coach there, and the experience that I got there was so rewarding. And so, as much as I was disappointed with being let go, I'm still thankful for that opportunity. But I never got back into college coaching after that.
So finally, and we'll finish off with this, I want to talk about what you're doing now. Help me out with the name of your team. Butch Bacala, I believe, told me your team is called Zuber's Zoots. Is that correct?
No, it's just called Zoots Baseball Club, Zoots. Nothing was Zuber.
Okay,
but nothing. It's not about me at all.
But it sounds like a playoff on your name. So yeah. Tell us about that. Let me ask you this, because when you were a kid and when I was a kid, high school summer baseball consisted of American Legion ball. In my case, I played what was known as Joe DiMaggio League ball, which is the same thing. 16 to 18, you played a 40-game schedule, and it was great. And this really seems to be, gone the way of the past. It's now all about travel ball. So talk about the pluses and the minuses, the good and the bad between the old way and the new way, which you're doing now.
Yeah, there is. I think the bad part about it is, one, the cost to the families is enormous, and just being able to play for the Lafayette Generals, to play for your town, to try to go to the American Legion World Series, to play in Yountville in the state, championships and stuff like that is lost. And I think that's a shame. When I first got to Cal, I was so naive to it because I'd been playing pro ball the whole time. I didn't know how it changed, and so I thought there was still just American Legion ball or Connie Mack ball or something like that, and I didn't realize all this travel stuff. And then I would go and watch these teams and these kids play, and at the tournaments in Arizona and all over the place, and there's some really good baseball, man. There were some really talented players out there. But there's also the guys that you would see on one team one week and on another team the next week. And, coaches and teams didn't really get to know each other. It didn't seem like, and you would ask a kid, hey, how'd the game go today? And he would say, hey, I got 2 hits. I'm like, well, did you win or lose? And some of them didn't even know. And so what I tried to build when I got out of it was something that fits into today's landscape, but is also more team oriented, and trying to teach a little bit more and help the kids try to get to the next level that they want to go to and play in college. And so that's sort of what we've been trying to do, and we've been really lucky. I think we've had 6 or 7 first round draft picks, and had over 200 kids go play in college, and I want to say somewhere between 50 and 60 signed professional contracts at some point. And
Jon, are these kids from Lafayette, Moraga, Orinda, or are they from a larger?
They're from more of the Bay Area.
Okay.
Than just, we do have some kids from Alcalanes and Camp Lindo but to go out and try to compete at the level that we try to compete at.
How many games are you playing in the course of a summer?
So the summer, it sort of depends. We're usually somewhere between 35 and 45 games.
Practicing much in between games?
That's the drawback. We can't practice very much. Because one, where the kids are all coming from, it's hard for them to all get there. We do practice some. Something that I've tried to do is because I know this is different from high school. So we don't have 5 bunt plays, and we don't have this or that, right? And I want the kids to individually get better. So what we do is we have some practices, but then we also have position specific practices.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have just straight catching, and we send them to the place called the Catching Academy, and they just work on their craft of catching. We were talking about Bobby Ralston earlier. Bobby used to run infield workouts for all my infielders, and so it's sort of what tools can we provide you to get better at your specific craft, as opposed to a team practice where you'd get out there and do something that a team does. So that's sort of how we try to run it, and I think it's been pretty good. Again, it's just so fortunate to be around some of these kids and they're so much better than I think I was when I was coming up playing. They're so much more advanced. The coaching, they know so much more about it, that it's really fun to see.
That's hard to imagine that someone could be more well-schooled than you were, as I recall, because you were very fundamentally sound.
The fundamentals aren't always there, but just the ability and the strength and things like that are are there. And I think a benefit of playing with that, like when I was in high school, I knew I was a pretty good baseball player for the East Bay. I didn't know how I matched up against some kid from Los Angeles or some kid from Phoenix or Seattle or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And with this, when you can travel and play teams from those areas, these kids are have so much more confidence in what they can do.
Is there, Jon, is there some kind of championship at the end of the summer that, like the NBC or?
There is not.
Okay.
There's USA Baseball hosts a tournament. It used to be called the Junior Olympics, and we used to go down to that. We actually were the only team at the time from Northern California to ever win it. But most of these, they're just showcase tournaments. Some of them aren't even tournaments. It's just, hey, come down here. You're going to play 5 games, whether you go 0-5 or 5-0.
Right.
You're getting 5 games, and we're going to try to put you in front of as many colleges and scouts as we can.
Okay, so we're closing in. We're down to the 9th inning here. Last time I saw you personally, you were still coaching at Cal. I think you had a couple of kids who were just little kids. So how old are your children now? And tell me a little bit of how they're doing.
Yeah, I think the last time we saw you, you were doing a book signing in Walnut Creek.
That's right.
And I went down.
It was from one of my SC books, and
Yeah.
you were buying it for Big Ed.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, was the he was the announcer, field announcer for Cal games for years. I think probably until he passed away almost.
He did it for quite a while. But I have 2 daughters. One of them's 25, and she just actually got her master's degree in school counseling. And so she's doing that. And then I have a younger daughter who's 21 who goes to college, and she's plays soccer for her school, and she's doing great. And my life revolves around them.
That's fantastic.
I could not be more proud of them.
Yeah, I can share that with you, Jon. I moved to New England because I wanted to be next to my family, and my daughter runs a bed and breakfast in a small town in Vermont, and here I am living a block and a half away. And as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to walk over and we're going to have dinner, and it's fantastic. But I want that. You reminded me about when you mentioned the book signing. I'll tell you a quick story, and then we're going to have to shut it down for the day. So this was right around the time that I was writing a lot of books on USC football history. So I was doing a lot of book signings at Annenberg School down at USC. So, and as you recall, there was a pitching coach who was at Cal at the time named Dave Lawn. And Dave has had a long career in baseball. He later became the pitching coach under Mike Gillespie at Cal. He is now at TCU. And for a period of time, he was involved in high school sports, I think, as an administrator. But when I was at Cal, he was the pitching coach, and he had a couple of daughters who were just little kids, just like my daughter was at the time. So I was sitting there signing books at Annenberg, and there was a long line because the books were doing very well. And a pretty young girl comes by, and she says, "I think you know my dad." And I go, "Well, who's your dad?" He goes, "My dad is Dave Lawn." And this was Dave Lawn's daughter. I can't remember her name, but she was a student at USC. And I think Dave was, I think he was still the pitching coach at USC at the time. So she was going to school there. So I signed that book over for Dave. She goes, "This is from my dad." And I said, "I hope you read it too." But yeah, that was fun when I did that book signing in Walnut Creek, and all of a sudden you showed up, and yeah, it brought us back to, both of us have these USC roots one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
But, You know, John, this has been a great conversation. I think this is one that is, you know, one of the things we're trying to do here is educate people on the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of the sports world. And nobody does it better than you, because we've talked to you about everything from youth ball to high school to Legion to collegiate ball to hitting with a wood bat on the Cape, and then getting into professional ball and playing with these old timers, guys like Jim Fregosi. That's as old school as it gets. And, you know, playing in that pre-Moneyball era, and you've survived it, you've lived it, you've thrived in it, and you're still doing it. Jon Zuber, I want to thank you for being my guest on Take 5 with Steven Travers.
I appreciate you asking me. It's an honor.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a fantastic interview. Next week, we are going to have Mr. Steve Campagno, who played professionally with the Yankees organization. He was once John Elway's roommate, and he later became a high school coach. And we're going to talk about his story. He coached high school ball in Alaska, in a small town in Alaska. So that's going to be an interesting story, a little bit different. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Take 5 with Steven Travers. I thank Jon Zuber, thank Logan Landers, and until we meet again, goodbye.